Hey, I'm CesarCreates. Welcome back to Bellemont Zoo, where today we're going to be completing our huge African area here with an island playground for an animal we've never built for before, the bonobo. Let's go. This is the space that I've reserved for an ape house since we started the zoo. The path on the left will take people through to Asia, and then the other path will take people round to the indoor habitat for the bonobo. It looks pretty big, but we're going to need to surround it with a moat that is 7.5 meters wide, which is going to eat into quite a lot of that space. So we're going to have to get creative about how we use the space to make sure that the bonobos have got enough room. These markers show where the moat is going to go, and once we've put them in, you can see we've got just over 1,000 square meters, which is sufficient for an outdoor habitat, but they'll need an indoor one as well. So we're going to build that in between the savanna and the Tarkin habitat here, which is kind of dead space at the moment, and that enables us to get a much better size. We need an absolute minimum of 1,200 square meters for the bonobos, which is enough for a group of 10 or so bonobo, which is how many we're going to have. That's the smallest group size you should have in a habitat according to their care manual. All these barriers are temporary. We just need to know exactly how big it's going to be. And with the indoor area, we're up to 1,484 square meters, which is big enough. Let's start building. The inspiration for this habitat comes from two different zoos, the Great Primate Zoo in the Netherlands, Appel, and Wilhelmer Zoo and Botanical Gardens in Stuttgart in Germany. The thing I loved about Appel, and I'm almost certainly pronouncing that wrong, as always with Dutch zoos, is the entrance, which is what we're going to be building here. It is really cool and probably one of the most intricate things we've ever built on the channel. It's going to be quite a challenge. And then in the Wilhelmer Zoo, they have this amazing climbing structure in their bonobo habitat, which is really crazy, and we're going to be building that later. I want the habitat to have its own entrance to make it more impressive. This is the only great ape in the zoo, and it's a pretty big habitat, so we really want to announce it to guests as they come down this path here. So we're starting with a wall, which I'm building using one of the pieces from the Twilight pack, which I don't think we've used before, which is like a little window ledge, but if you double it up, it makes a really nice brick. And then on top of that, we're going to have all sorts of crazy wooden shapes made from loads of different pieces. It's really kind of random looking, almost like it's about to fall down, but it looks really cool. So we'll just fill in these wall shapes with mulch and then some bamboo. This will provide a nice backdrop, and it also hides those staff buildings there. They serve the Flamingo Lagoon and the lions, and will also serve the bonobos once it's done. And once we've got all of that filled in and the staff buildings hidden away, we're going to use these pieces to create this bizarre wooden structure. We'll start nice and simply with a tree stump here, and then we'll get on to the more difficult stuff. This is one of the climbing branches, and this and a few of the other branches from the Habitat and Nature and Construction tabs are going to be used to put this structure together. It forms an archway that goes over the path, so the guests will walk under this to get into the bonobos. We're going to place it in such a way that as you walk up to it, you can see the bonobo habitat in the distance through the archway. I've not been to Appel myself, but I think this just sits next to a little path that takes people up to a viewing gallery. Although I could be wrong, I just had the one reference photo to go from, but as soon as I saw it, I knew I wanted to get it into Bellemont Zoo and use it as the entrance to the habitat. We'll use the smaller climbing log here on top of the longer one, and what we need to do is create longer branches just using these two branches repeated that actually look natural and kind of snake their way across the path and go down into the bamboo beds on either side, up into the air, form a sign, all sorts of things. So it's a lot of just placing these down and then being really careful with how we place and rotate them to get them to sort of look the way that we want. And as I do this, I'm following a reference photo pretty much exactly. Don't really want to change anything, just get things as close as we possibly can with the pieces available to us. If we can get this right, it might be one of the builds I'm most proud of, to be honest. Not 100% sure that we can put it off as we start building it here. And as we continue struggling with these branches, let's talk a bit about what the new Asia Animal Pack means for Bellemont Zoo. Lots and lots of questions from you guys in the comments on the announcement video about what animals were going to go into Bellemont Zoo, and the answer, I think, is 3 of the animals from the new pack plus the butterfly from the free update, seeing as we already have a little butterfly house all set up for them. One of them will be going in straight away in an episode that will be coming out at some point next week. That is going to be a big habitat. I've got big plans for one of the animals. And then we've got 2 little spots in the zoo, one next to the adventure playground and one next to our ocelot aviary, where I've known since we built them that we're going to need a little something somewhere in there to fill in the space. They're on the very long list of little bits that need adding into the zoo, so we're going to use that opportunity to add 2 more animals in, and at least one of those animals will be from the new pack. And then finally, one of the animals has inspired me to make a little bit of a change to one of the existing parts of the zoo, and that will be coming in a future episode as well. This is starting to come together. We're going to work on the sign now. So we're using these bamboo panels, which are a really cool piece. It's little random planks of wood in the original, but we don't really have any small enough, and we certainly don't have any random looking enough to get that to work. So we're going to use these bamboo panels instead. We're going to curve that over this flower bed here, and then we'll use one of Wyatt Andrews' amazing fonts to get the name of the animals up here. This takes a lot of doing because each one of these planks is going in a slightly different direction and at a slightly different angle. So we've got to place each letter individually and make sure it's in exactly the right spot, so it's not just floating in midair, but it's also not intersecting with the planks. And then we also need to rotate each letter so it follows nicely the curve of the sign. So it takes a long time, but well worth doing. Once it's in, then we can start putting the final touches to this little entrance display. We're going to fill in this part of it with some planks, and then we'll fill in these twisted branches here with more of the bamboo panels, but they're a little big for this part at the end and they don't come in any other sizes. So for this part we'll take these really small wooden pieces, colour them so they're the same as the bamboo panels, and then just start placing these in at the same angle. And from down on the path where the guests are going to be, you can't really tell where the bamboo ends and these begin. And that's pretty much all the wood place that we need to put in there. Glad we've got to the end of that. We just need to put some plants in and a few final finishing touches. We'll place some hosta in here as a little bit of a climbing plant. I've got some nettles just poking out through the ground at the bottom and a few arrowwood bushes, and if we zoom out, there we go, that's the entrance complete. Really happy with how that looks. Let's move on and start building the main part of the habitat. Firstly, we need to dig out the moat. So we'll just fill in between the path and the fences. Those fences will just be null barriers when we're finished. You won't actually see any chain link or anything like that in here. And then we'll put some water in, and as usual, colour it green and slightly reduce the transparency, gets a much more realistic look. And then we'll start getting some rocks in around the edge of the land to cover up the bare terrain. We're going to use a set of rocks we've used throughout this African area, but later on we're going to recolour it to more of a grey to get away from the sort of savanna-y feel that they have here. And then there's a part of the habitat that will join the moated part onto their indoor habitat. We need a rock wall for that. So we're going to build one of those using some of the plaster cones and some of the faux rocks just to cover up that space there. For Bonobo, you need at least 5 metre high wall with an overhang as well. So we'll get one of those in here. We've used the plaster cones for walls before in the Indian rhino habitat. They've got a really good shape to them, which makes them great for stuff like this. As long as you spin each one round before you place it down, you get a really random kind of texture to the front of the wall, which prevents it from looking too samey. Once we've got one of those in, we can just line up this piece of wall here. We'll chuck in one of the other rock piles we've used in this area as well, just to finish it off nicely at the end. And that's that wall done. We've just got one more to go on the other side. We're going to place the same wall up against the back of the Tarkin habitat just to make sure that it's smoother so they can't climb it, and we've got the overhang in as well, stop them from getting in with the Tarkins. And we can move on to some terrain work. We want the terrain in the habitat to look interesting, and we also want lots of height variations for the bonobo to keep them interested. So quickest way to do that is to do it quite roughly with the terrain stamp tool. So we'll just put various different heights of terrain around the habitat, and then we can go in with the smooth tool and start making it all look good. I thought it might be nice where the land meets the water as well, just to have a little waterfall. So we'll drop in one of the waterfall effect pieces and then just move the rocks that we've already got there to cover up the edges. They're all randomly rotated so we can get a really natural look to this without too much effort. Just move those along there, move one of the plants, and there we go, nice little waterfall. And then we're going to use some rocks to join the lower part of the terrain onto the higher part of the terrain. Gives it a much more interesting look than just having the terrain sort of rise up like a hill if you've got a bit more of an edge to it. Once we've got the rocks in place, we'll raise the terrain up to meet them so it all looks nice and clean. And then we'll use some of the natural rocks mixed in with those faux rocks to get a bit more texture and a bit more of a shape into it. We just put them around the edges. That's going to start to look really good. And then we can fill the whole habitat in, as usual, with the buffalo grass. I don't know how long I've spent placing buffalo grass in this game, but luckily, due to the power of editing, you don't have to watch it all. So there we go, that's the grass in. We're going to move on now to an electric fence. So why an electric fence? Well, much like chimpanzees, bonobos do not like water. They're not really swimmers. It's not something they enjoy. It's not something they encounter very often where they live. They will avoid water wherever possible, but like all primates, they can move through water if they need to. so the electric fence just acts as a secondary barrier to make sure they're contained. With that done, we'll do our usual little trick with the forage feeder and bury that into the ground. And then it's time to move on to the crazy climbing frame that forms the centerpiece of this habitat. I came across Zoo Wilhelma in a photo on ZooChat. They have an enormous aviary for their bonobos. With the design of this habitat, we don't need any mesh or anything like that, but in the center of the habitat was this enormous climbing frame. It looked like something out of the Wicker Man or something. Absolutely crazy. And straight away I thought, let's have that in Bellemont Zoo. It's an entirely wood structure. It is really, really tall, and it is just a crazy collection of planks, logs, tree trunks, all sorts of things going up into this big wooden tower that looks really imposing and provides an enormous number of climbing opportunities for the bonobo. Now, this took a long time to build, and the whole time I was building it, all I could think about was the hours it was going to take me to modify it once we had the bonobo into the habitat to get them to actually use it. But when I added the bonobo into the habitat, they used it instantly. I didn't have to move a single piece. I could barely believe it myself as I looked at it. I'd set aside an hour just to fiddle around with it to get it to work. I literally haven't touched this build since I added the bonobo in. They used every single plank on this build instantly. I don't know if it was magic or if the bonobo in this game were just brilliant at climbing. Luck, not sure what it was, but you will see them climbing all over it in the end cinematics. We've got some little sleeping pods for them made out of the climbing platform and some of the African baskets. And the final thing to do with the climbing frame is to join everything together with some big thick ropes. We're using the thinnest climbing log for this, probably the best tool for this, I think. And we'll just manually join every part of this climbing frame up together with those and then copy them around. It's not perfect with it being made from a log, but it gives that kind of vibe of the sort of fire hose kind of thick climbing that you often get in ape habitats. And then we're going to give them a tire to swing on as well, and we're going to attach it to the climbing frame using a piece from the Zookeeper's Animal Pack. I think I said this when the pack came out, could only possibly ever have one use in the zoo, and that is to recolor it and use it as a fire hose, and I think it does a really good job at that. It's the maypole ribbon, and it's got this really interesting kind of twisted texture to it, and if we place that on top of the tire and then we give it a sort of desaturated kind of red colour, it will give us that look of a kind of fire hose, which is often used in ape habitats to attach things together. And there we go, that's the climbing frame done. There's 3 posts positioned around this habitat, and those are going to be the viewing points for the guests, and we'll fill in the gaps between the posts with some reeds and some fences, and the rest of it will be viewing. The advice for creating bonobo habitats is to make sure that guest viewing is A, on the same level as the bonobo so they don't feel threatened by things above them, and B, that it is subtle and separated into different points so there isn't a big wodge of guests staring at them. They're mostly surrounded by foliage and there's just little peek-throughs for the guests. The final stage for the build is to complete their indoor habitat, so we're going to put some implied chutes in here that they can get in and out of the habitat with. We're going to copy the entrance to the whole area and place this over the entrance to the building just to make that look more impressive. We'll put some mud panels in for the floor and use a bit of a gradient to cover up a terrain change that we've got in there. We'll copy the floor onto the ceiling and recolor that, and that's that taken care of. Then we're going to put in some grids of metal that go across the ceiling so that we can hang climbing things from it. So you'll see in the end cinematics we've got a tire hanging from this, various other things. It's something you see a lot of in indoor ape habitats. So we'll make something pretty simple, just using some mesh, a few of the European marquee beams, and some LED tubes. They are the perfect size for this, and if you turn the lights off they won't shine up or anything like that. We'll copy that all across the ceiling, and then we've just got one more thing to do, put the substrate in. So I looked at a lot of different ape substrates for this, and one of the most popular ones is a really deep substrate of straw, soil, etc. that can be positioned into the habitat above some grates with drainage. Nice and soft, and I thought some mulch and some of the straw sleeping pieces would work well for that. So we'll just place those in, and that's it. The habitat is built. Let's check it out. I love how this entrance looks. All credit to Apple for creating the design, nothing to do with me, but I think we've recreated it really well. I cannot believe how much climbing is going on this structure. It's absolutely crazy. It's the first climbing structure I've ever built that hasn't needed huge amounts of readjustments after building to get the animals to actually use it. And it's really good to finally get one of the grey apes in Bellemont Zoo. Originally I had a massive ape house planned for this zoo based on Zoo Leipzig's Pongo Land, which features every species of grey ape. But after a few areas were done, I realised that there was just no way we were going to get something that big into Bellemont Zoo, so I decided to concentrate on one ape. And seeing as we've never used the bonobo before on the channel, and we're right next to the Africa area, that seemed to be the sensible choice. There's a tyre suspended from that grating that we built here, and here's the bonobo. There we go, this is where we started today, and just behind the Madagascar house, this is where we are now. Bellemont Zoo is looking very full indeed, but I think we've still got 5 episodes of building left before this zoo is completed. Thank you for watching as always. Thank you so much to those of you who've joined the Explorers Club. I will see you again very soon for an overview of the Asia Animal Pack and a brand new episode. Bye.